Joining us right now is the co-founder and chairman of the Center for Freedom and Prosperity, tax policy analyst Dan Mitchell. Dan, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. What's your take? What's your take on this CBO scoring and the Obamacare repeal? Is this now dead in the water?
It's hard to see how they get anywhere because you have a couple of Republican senators on the left, Collins, Murkowski, and I guess McCain is on the left now, even though he campaigned for repealing Obamacare. And then you have Rand Paul and Ted Cruz on the right, who are very frustrated that it's only repealing a slice of Obamacare. So I feel sorry for Mitch McConnell. I mean, the Democrats had complete unity when they had 60 members to cram Obamacare down the throats of the country. But now Republicans can't even get 50 of their members to vote yes on a very, very timid repeal bill.
So is there anything that can be done, any tweaks to be made, do you think, that would get Ted Cruz's yes or any other senator? That's a no.
I suspect Ted Cruz would be the easiest one to get of the ones that are on the fence or voting no. The problem is, how do you bribe Murkowski and Collins, and I think McCain's just going to vote no because he doesn't like Trump. But, you know, whatever amount of money you throw to try to bribe Murkowski and Collins, that's just going to make Rand Paul and Ted Cruz and other conservatives even more upset about the fact that this bill doesn't really reduce the burden of government that Obamacare is imposing on the economy.
Dan, I find it pretty interesting that you said you feel bad for Mitch McConnell, given the fact that he's the one part of this Republican leadership that has started with health care when really they should have been focusing on stoking the economy by coming out with tax cuts or starting with tax reform. Where do you see tax reform, tax cuts going in this legislative agenda? We know that if they don't get it done by March, it may be hard for some actual real reform to come done. Where are we in the process of getting taxes done? Yeah. If they don't get it done by March 2018, I think there may be some issues getting it done at all in 2018.
Okay.
Well, first, let me say that I feel a little bit sorry for McConnell because after promising for 7.5 years they would repeal Obamacare the moment they got power, he's now in a situation where many of his members, or not many, but a few of them who promised during their campaigns they would vote to repeal, now won't even vote for a very timid repeal of a part of Obamacare. Now, having gotten that out of the way, on taxes, in theory, this should be the easier thing to achieve, and I guess we'll see later this week when things get rolled out. But once again, there's going to be a problem in the Senate. You have some of these showboating senators who are going to suddenly come up with, oh, well, we don't want to cut taxes for the rich, or we don't want to increase the deficit, or we want to make things permanent, or we want to make things. There'll be excuses coming out of the you-know-what because some of these members are. It's like the Middle East without peacekeepers. That's the problem on Capitol Hill right now on the Republican side. Trump is not a unifying figure for them. And without Trump being a unifying figure, it's like trying to herd cats in the Senate.
Dan, but what do we end up with in terms of health care in this country and health insurance? Do we just get more Obamacare? Will they just throw money at it to try and fix the problems? And ultimately, are we on the road to single payer for all?
Well, I'm afraid we're on the road to bigger and bigger and bigger government with Uncle Sam shoveling more money to the states. I mean, it's getting so bad, I'm thinking, well, I'm in London, maybe I'll ask for asylum. But here's the thing that really frustrates me about this debate and discussion. The Congressional Budget Office says millions will lose their insurance. No, that is complete nonsense. What's going to happen without the mandate, in other words, without the gun of government pointing at their head, a lot of Americans, millions of them, are going to say, it's not worth it. I don't want it. In other words, Obamacare partial repeal frees these people from the burdens of the individual mandate. They don't want to buy an overpriced, crummy, government-designed insurance package. So they're not losing their insurance. They're being freed from the mandate and penalty of being forced to buy something they don't want. And for those of us who still have some vestigial belief in freedom, that should be a good thing, not something like Susan Collins says, oh, this is terrible, that people aren't being forced to do things they don't want to do.
Well, Dan, I would just add to that, dovetailing on what Dagan was talking about, that Susan Collins isn't just making the point about millions losing their insurance. She's also talking about the fact that there aren't pre-existing protections, pre-existing conditions protections, and Medicaid expansion, which many red state senators have taken. I'm curious, though, what you think about the chances are for the Murray-Alexander bill to be resurrected, because as Dagan points out, Obamacare is in a little bit of trouble. I don't think it's the death spiral that many on the right are making it out to be, but we no doubt need revisions to the bill to make it work for all Americans. So do you think that maybe Mitch McConnell will allow some bipartisanship again, and we can get back to what Murray and Alexander were working on?
I have a hard time seeing how that kind of legislation moves forward, because you're going to have not just Rand Paul and Ted Cruz, you're going to have a lot of people saying, wait, shoveling more subsidies at the states, that's not a good thing, that's a bad thing. We're taking money out of states, carrying it in a leaky bucket to Washington, sloshing some around on the bureaucracy, and then we're carrying it back to the states in a leaky bucket. Why should taxpayers in Iowa subsidize healthcare consumers in Maine, and why should taxpayers in Maine subsidize healthcare consumers in Iowa? Medicaid should be block granted to the states, and then let states decide, okay, for hard luck cases, the pre-existing conditions people, what do? A high-risk pool? Do you just directly subsidize? But the problem is these politicians who think that you can have insurance based on the fact that you could wait until you get sick to get a policy, that's crazy. You might as well just rip up and destroy insurance. It's sort of like me saying, I'm going to burn down my house, and the next day I'm going to call up my insurance company and say, oh, I want to get a policy. So it doesn't work. You have to figure out a different way to subsidize, and it's just not going to be very effective if you do it out of Washington. And that's the problem. We have a completely Washington-centric approach. And why do politicians do that? Because if you're Susan Collins or some other for-rent politician, your state legislature is saying, hey, shovel more money to our state, not realizing that the money's coming out of your state to finance Uncle Sam.
Dan,
so it is a very frustrating situation.
Does this
very
failure
pessimistic.
impact tax reform, Dan, real quick?
Tax reform, I think Republicans are desperate to get some sort of win. Yes, there are some big fights internally among the GOP. Do you make things permanent? What do you make permanent? How do you deal with the class warfare attacks you're going to get from the left? But ultimately, getting the corporate tax rate down to make America competitive, I think is so critical that somehow even the incompetent Republicans will figure out a way of pushing that across the finish line.
All right, we'll be watching. Dan, thanks so much for your insights this morning. Dan Mitchell joining us there.
Thank you.